made a phone call to my unfaithful spouse's lover while they were together. A wave of fury and resentment washed over me. My words were icy, deliberate, informing her I was filing for divorce. The quick breaths on the other end of the line, the deafening silence of someone unsure of their next move, yet my decision had already been solidified. There was no turning back. She attempted to reach me, sent messages. He attempted to rationalize the indefensible. But what else could I say? What could I hear that would alter the truth that in that moment love ceased to exist? The late nights she returned, the smiles withheld from me, the excuses, it all made sense now. I had anticipated this day, but never envisioned its harshness and finality. So ruthless, so conclusive. The gathering was at a mutual friend's residence. She didn't know I was attending, nor that it would be our last meeting as husband and wife. I arrived, decided. In the din of music, laughter, and colorful lights that pulsed around the room, it was a harsh juxtaposition to the emptiness I felt within. I moved among the crowd, disregarding talks, stares. All I desired was to reach her, both of them. Before they even noticed me, I spotted them huddled together, laughing carelessly, unaware of the impending turmoil. It seared me inside. She, my wife, the woman I vowed to coexist with. How could she? And he, a bystander, an inconsequential figure who was oblivious to my plans. As I neared, time seemed to crawl. They appeared as if in slow motion, each gesture, every smile, and what enraged me most was her lack of remorse. There was no guilt etched on her face, as if their actions were just another ordinary event, devoid of repercussions. But there would be consequences. I told her I was filing for divorce. The words reverberated through the air, my voice unwavering, leaving no room for doubt. I watched her freeze. His laughter vanished from his mouth, as if it had never been there. Her eyes enlarged, then despair set in. What are you doing here?" She stammered, her face pallid, her expression shocked. I remained silent, observing as she tried to comprehend the situation. His hand still rested on her arm, a touch that once seemed carefree, but now felt heavy with guilt. She attempted to pull away, but he stayed, bewildered, unsure of how to respond. "Wait, let me clarify. It's not as you think." Her voice cracked, the words rushing out hastily, anguished. However, there was no explanation that could mend what had been shattered. What do you do when the world you knew disintegrates before your eyes? When the person you trusted the most betrays you? I didn't want to shout. I didn't want to weep. I wanted her to grasp what she had done. I wanted her to feel the void that now pervaded every fiber of my being. She continued talking, jumbling words without meaning. "Enough." I stopped listening, only watching now. The terror in your eyes. Her attempt to rationalize the irrational. His hesitant gaze at me, unsure of what to say. A thick silence descended upon us three. He looked to her as if waiting for understanding, but she was bewildered. "Let me clarify," she persisted, as if there were still words left to speak. I gave a slight nod. No more explanations. No more rationalizations. All that remained was the conclusion, and I wanted her to understand, to experience every second of this agony. "There's nothing to explain." My voice was soft but piercing. "I already know everything." She attempted to approach, her eyes gleaming with tears that wouldn't change anything. Tears that, in my eyes, were as unauthentic as the apologies she was trying to create. "Please, I made a mistake." In that instant, her voice quivered, and it struck me then the seriousness of our predicament. Yet, it was too late. My lost nights were filled with self-blame and searching for flaws within myself. I had misstepped somewhere, somehow. But now I understood that I wasn't at fault. This revelation gave me more freedom than anything else. Her pleas were futile attempts to persuade me of something she herself doubted. Each word was a frantic effort to reverse the inevitable, to rewrite a fate she had chosen. Yet, she was out of options. What else could she offer? What more could I listen to that would erase the truth? In that moment, love perished. My decision was made. That was all that remained certain. As she sank deeper into despair, it dawned on me what truly mattered now wasn't her words or emotions. What mattered was mine, and I felt nothing anymore. The void had swallowed all it touched. She gazed at me, anticipating a response, a lifeline. Yet, I was no longer the man she once knew. The one who cherished her, who would sacrifice for her, he was vanished. In his stead, there existed an individual who grasped precisely what he desired, and what I yearned for was my liberation. Once you attain a stage where emotions cease to exist, nothing tethers you, nothing that compels you to persevere. I had reached that stage, the instant when every word loses significance and quietude becomes the lone reply. I departed from the gathering, abandoning her with her excuses, remorse, and hollow pledges. She was ensnared in a realm she herself had fashioned, and I was liberated. However, what she failed to comprehend was that this divorce would not merely signify a parting. There would be more, something she hadn't recognized yet, something imminent, poised to alter everything. How would she react when she found out that the world as she knew it was truly disintegrating? What transpires when your worst nightmare isn't the dissolution of your marriage, but the destruction of everything you've carefully constructed? Welcome to our channel. Here, we never condone any form of deceit. The tales you hear may be fictional, yet they vividly illustrate how treachery shatters lives, families, and confidence. Prepare yourself, for what you are about to listen to is an emotionally charged and startling narrative. Settle in as we guide you on a gripping and revealing odyssey. The clock on the wall reads 7 p.m., yet time seemed to crawl. John sat on the living room couch, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his thoughts drifting away. The house, once a sanctuary of love and joy, now appeared as just an empty stage. The quiet was almost unbearable. The television hummed, but he barely noticed the pictures flashing across the screen. His thoughts wandered, immersed in recollections of times long past, slipping through his grasp like grains of sand. As typical, Melissa had departed in the morning. Lately, she's been growing more distant, spending fewer moments with him, whether through affectionate gestures, shared meals, or evening discussions. John recalled how eagerly he used to find her waiting for him at the door after a tiresome workday. The routine offered a sense of security, knowing she was always there. Yet recently, Melissa had morphed into a stranger. He could still picture their first encounter. She was the most radiant woman he'd ever seen, exuding infectious energy and an air of mystique that charmed everyone. Their shared laughter once filled the city's bars when they danced together. People said John was fortunate to have won her, and he agreed. He considered himself the most fortunate man, having her by his side. Marriage was his ultimate aspiration since the start, and they constructed a life brimming with mutual support. Challenges arose, yet they persevered together. Melissa was his confidante in all aspects of life. Their aspirations, goals, and dreams were intertwined, often including discussions on starting a family, exploring the globe, and growing old hand in hand. For a substantial period, it appeared as if they were steadily progressing towards achieving these dreams. Yet, over time, minor fissures emerged. At first, these cracks seemed insignificant, merely signs of change. Melissa became engrossed in work, frequently staying late and justifying herself with her new professional role. John tried to rationalize it as the effect of workplace stress. He too invested countless hours at his company, aiming to develop his business. They had always exhibited a united front, capable of overcoming any adversity together. Nevertheless, something seemed amiss, something he couldn't pinpoint precisely. Melissa displayed a more somber disposition, less eager about the things that previously brought joy to her face. Her exuberance in discussing their shared past had faded, leaving John unable to breach the wall she erected. The easy camaraderie, the fluid dialogues were replaced by tense silence. Each word felt like a struggle, the distance between them expanding. That evening, as he contemplated his whiskey, John felt a heavy burden in his heart. He wished to believe this was just a passing storm. Wasn't that how marriages fluctuated? Yet, deep within, he suspected something fundamentally amiss. The most troubling aspect was the sensation of powerlessness, the uncertainty of mending the fractured bond. The sound of tires on gravel heralded Melissa's return. John stared at the door, awaiting the customary key click. She stepped in briskly, removing her coat and setting her bag on the couch. A fleeting interchange of gazes, a robotic hi, as if they were mere lodgers under one roof. This was how they greeted each other. "How was your day?" John inquired, though his tone belied the thick tension hanging between them. "Tiring," Melissa responded, avoiding eye contact as she headed for the kitchen. This terse reply had become routine. It was always the same story. John pondered if she even perceived her distance, or perhaps she no longer cared. It was challenging to discern the workings of Melissa's mind, and this ambiguity tormented him. That night, he opted against posing more queries. I didn't want to burden her, not at that juncture. As per custom, they dined in silence, as usual. The words missing from that void were replaced by the clink of cutlery and the groaning of chairs. John observed Melissa from the corner of his gaze, searching for hints of the woman he had grown fond of. Though she was present physically, she appeared distant mentally. This intangible absence troubled him immensely. Following dinner, as usual, Melissa retired to her room. John stayed behind, engrossed in contemplation. He realized he couldn't keep up the charade any longer, but what other options were there? Accepting reality seemed too agonizing a choice. He adored Melissa, but it seemed love was no longer sufficient to bridge their gap. Over time, he started questioning his actions. Could it have been the job, the long hours at work, that kept them apart? Had he missed the signs indicating trouble? These doubts swirled into a tempest within him, leaving him powerless in the face of what seemed an impending rift between them. In her room on the opposite side of the house, Melissa contemplated her reflection, consumed by her own thoughts. Her eyes mirrored exhaustion and doubt. She understood John was striving, recognized he still held affection. Yet, an impassable gap existed between them she couldn't bridge. At times, Melissa pondered if it was herself or the world altering around her. She once loved John entirely, and yet there remained something for him, a profound sentiment. However, that love morphed over time, diluted into something distinct. Perhaps it was the pressures of expectations and duties that accumulated over the years. Maybe it was work that swallowed her whole. Or possibly it was herself, no longer the woman John once knew. The reality is that when she lay beside him, she frequently sensed a void unreachable by words, and this quiet solitude incited self-doubt regarding her decisions. Melissa acknowledged John deserved better, but simultaneously felt incapable of delivering what he yearned for. In quietude, their home was dominated by their individual turmoil, oblivious to the impending decision shaping their relationship. The ensuing events would irrevocably alter their lives, yet the only definitive feeling they harbored that morning was uncertainty about the future. In that uncertainty, a chasm emerged between them, within which something unacknowledged and unprepared for was poised to surface. As daylight broke, John woke up earlier than customary, but the burden on his chest felt distinctly new. A nagging concern gnawed at him, one he could no longer dismiss. Melissa had once again departed before him, a pattern that had persisted for weeks, her "see you later" lingering as an insubstantial whisper through the house. Their silent ritual had become almost unbearable, etched so deeply it felt oppressive. John realized he could no longer endure that void. The rift no longer made sense to him, and he was weary of questioning when and where their bond began to fray. John required clarity, felt compelled to grasp the truth concerning his wife's situation. The gap between them wasn't mere discomfort, it was ominous. It wasn't temporary or work-related stress. There was something deeper, something he couldn't quite define yet, but soon would uncover. At work, John struggled to focus on tasks, every phone vibration making him suspect if it was Melissa. Perhaps she had sensed the distance, maybe she sought dialogue to resolve matters. However, reality always proved different: work messages, meeting reminders, merely a repetitive routine devoid of satisfying his wife's emotional requirements. Hours slipped away as he gazed at his computer screen, trying to suppress the mounting apprehension that all was not well. It was then that a nagging thought surfaced: the private detective he had employed to track Melissa, an impulsive decision, had left a message earlier, but John lacked the courage to hear it. The phone remained on the table, serving as a mute witness that the simple act of hitting that button could irrevocably alter John's existence. He acknowledged that listening to the message represented a stride towards a truth. he wasn't certain he was prepared to confront. With a leaden heart, he clicked play. The detective's authoritative voice echoed distinctly, without a hint of indecision. "Sir, I have the details you inquired about. I advise you to examine the images I am forwarding as attachments. Your wife has been absent from work to meet a man at occasions and locales that leave little room for ambiguity regarding their relationship." The words pierced like a sharp blade. John paused, overwhelmed by the deluge of information. He harbored suspicions that something was amiss, but the confirmation, this tangible pain, was something he wasn't equipped to handle. His hands trembled as he unlocked the attachments. Crystal clear images depicted Melissa exiting a restaurant, engaged in jovial conversation and intimate banter with another man. Months without such intimacy and trust, John realized his wife Melissa was unfaithful. The evidence was clear. A sinking feeling washed over him as he pondered how to act on this knowledge. Rage and sorrow coursed through his veins, but humiliation dominated. For weeks, while John fretted about the fate of their marriage, Melissa had been living a separate life, one where he no longer fit. He abruptly left work without an explanation, his thoughts swirling with questions and potential outcomes on the ride home. Why had she betrayed him? What was it about the other man that he lacked? His memories of happy times together, their shared vows, flickered through his mind like fleeting images from a distant film, now seeming more like a deception. He had invested so much in that marriage, and now all that remained were shattered fragments. In the deserted house, John sat at the kitchen table, gazing vacantly, the clocks ticking reverberating around him. His anger morphed into a chill. He recognized he had to act, yet a corner of him lingered in uncertainty. Perhaps talk to her candidly. Maybe wait for her to speak first. Doubts whispered at his thoughts, but one fact was undeniable. He needed to see her. He needed to gaze into her eyes and verify if what he felt was accurate. That night, Melissa didn't return home as usual. John knew her whereabouts. The photos, the recurring meetings, he had discerned the pattern already. And then, almost instinctively, he reached for his phone and dialed his lover. A dark curiosity gnawed at his mind, a compulsion to know what they did when he was absent. "Hello?" The man's voice sounded taken aback. John held his silence for a while, but then his words emerged clear, unwavering. "Inform her I'm filing for divorce." There was an extended pause on the other end. John could envision the disbelief etched across their faces. Melissa, predictably, looked pale and unresponsive. It was irreversible. The deception had been exposed. The life they constructed together, their schemes, their aspirations, it all appeared fragile, on the verge of crumbling. John hung up the phone without waiting for a response. He knew Melissa would attempt to call back, plead her case, but he didn't want to listen. Not at that moment. Explanations wouldn't alter the fact that she had made her decision. The pain in his chest was intense, yet a peculiar sense of relief was surfacing. He was no longer ensnared in the maze of doubt. The betrayal had been disclosed, and now only the aftermath remained to be confronted. However, there was something Melissa remained ignorant of. Something John had also planned. It wasn't merely about divorce. Sitting on the couch, John's mind was still whirling from the call he made to Melissa's lover. The atmosphere hung heavy within the dwelling. He knew this tranquility wouldn't last long. Melissa was due back, likely frantic, searching for a remedy to mend what had already been shattered. He understood the betrayal had been exposed, yet there remained a larger issue to be addressed, one she was unaware of. This forthcoming revelation would diminish the current tension in comparison to the storm brewing ahead. The door's creak resonated through the house, followed by Melissa's advancing footsteps. Entering the room, her face bore a ghostly pallor, her eyes wide with dread. John remained frozen, gazing intently at her. For a moment, Melissa hesitated, torn between drawing nearer or maintaining distance. "John, please," her voice quivered, on the verge of supplication. "Hear me out. I can clarify." He stayed silent, his gaze icy and detached. Melissa slowly advanced, her hands trembling, searching for words that might soothe the tumult. She admitted her error, trembling slightly. She was at a loss about where to start, but she needed him to comprehend. I was adrift. We were relocating, and I didn't know how to proceed. Listen to me, please. Tears cascaded down her face, yet John remained unfazed. She persisted in speaking, the words tumbling out hurriedly, but he no longer heeded them. Her apologies became a distant hum, incapable of piercing the fortress he had constructed around himself. He had spent an extended period self-blaming, searching for his mistakes, yet now it all seemed so obvious. She had made her decision, and there was no turning back. This isn't about us, Melissa. John eventually broke the quiet, his voice as sharp as a blade. This is about your actions. She paused, her imploring gaze momentarily frozen, as if her words struck an impenetrable barrier. I know I hurt you, but I love you. I still love you. Her voice escalated in despair. We can resolve this, John. We can mend everything. Fix what exactly? John abruptly rose, his suppressed anger erupting. Betrayal, Melissa, it wasn't an accident. It was a conscious decision. A choice you made repeatedly while I was here, trying to salvage something you had already wrecked. No, she exclaimed, bordering on panic. It's not as you think. I was perplexed, yet I wished to be with you. I erred, but that doesn't mean I don't cherish you. John gazed at her, his heart pounding in his breast. A part of him yearned to believe, to cling to the hope that this was indeed a blunder that could be absolved. But another part, the logical part, recognized that nothing would ever return to its former state. And what was even more disheartening, he knew Melissa remained oblivious to the extent of the precipice she was about to plunge into. She was yet unaware of the abyss's depth. Do you believe love justifies all this? His voice held a semblance of control, but bitterness still resonated within. Can we merely undo the past and return to our previous state? Melissa stared at him, her eyes welling up with tears. She appeared distraught, gasping for breath, trembling with emotion. And then John understood it was the moment. It was time to reveal to her that deception concealed a much deeper issue. He moved closer to her, slowly approaching. The room seemed to pulse with almost unbearable tension, the air thick with the burden of unsaid words. John extracted his phone from his pocket and, in a calculated manner, flung it onto the table. Melissa glanced at the gadget, puzzled. What is that? She queried, her voice cracking. John kept his eyes locked on her, unwavering. That, Melissa, is the proof. All the pictures, the meetings, everything. I knew what you were up to. I paid someone to trail you. His tone remained steady, but each utterance seemed to pierce Melissa like a dagger. She recoiled, the truth seeming to strike her bodily. John, she started weakly, but he cut in. I knew everything. I saw the photos. I know where you were. He breathed deeply, attempting to maintain composure, yet his anguish was palpable. The betrayal, the lie, you constructed it all. And now you're here, seeking explanation, as if that could alter anything. Melissa hid her face behind her hands, audible sobs echoing around us. He appeared bewildered, struggling to comprehend the end of the game. However, there was more. John stepped nearer, his gaze locked on hers, cold yet resolute. But that's not all, he said, with a tranquility that outstripped any shout. I made my decisions too, Melissa, and I want you to know that it won't simply be a divorce. She removed her hands from her face, still perplexed, striving to grasp the depth of his words. What do you mean? Her voice was barely audible. John advanced toward the table, grabbed an envelope, and unfolded it to reveal assorted papers. He scattered them on the table, their rustling sound filling the room. I shifted our funds into a different account, one that's mine alone. He spoke sternly. You won't have anything, Melissa. His statement left her startled, momentarily taken aback. What? She inquired, her voice faltering. John, no, you can't do this to me. Leaving me with nothing isn't fair. John folded his arms, observing as Melissa crumpled before him. I can and have done it, he retorted coldly. You ended our marriage, and now you must pay the price for your actions. No. Melissa lunged at him, distraught. John, please, don't take this step. I need you. The words became increasingly urgent, but John remained resolute, his resolve unwavering. It's past time for regrets, Melissa. Without a hint of emotion, he declared, You decided your path, now I choose mine. These words extinguished the last flicker of hope within Melissa. She crumpled to the floor, weeping despairingly, utterly defeated. The woman John once cherished was now a heap of regret and sorrow. Yet, despite the agony, he acknowledged that this was the necessary conclusion to this chapter in his life. Leaving Melissa there on the living room carpet, John departed. No longer harboring the rage that had gripped him earlier, he felt a sense of accomplishment, freedom. He recognized that much remained to be settled: the divorce, the financial matters. But at that moment, he possessed something Melissa could never anticipate: control. Melissa's sobs reverberated in the room as John, standing still, observed her silently. He had expressed everything necessary, made decisions he had delayed for a long time. The grim expression on her countenance, the sorrow evident when she comprehended nothing remained to salvage, harshly validated the solitary course he'd taken was inevitable. Contrary to my assumption, a sense of triumph didn't materialize. Instead, John experienced a disquieting wave as he beheld the woman who had been his world's axis, now a delicate form huddled on the floor, imploring for something non-existent. He strove to retain the rage that propelled him here, but the intensity of that sentiment gradually abated, replaced by an emptiness. Following utter devastation, what comes next? How is the wreckage managed? Melissa, still weeping, wrestled with speech. Her voice was strangled, suffocated by distress, yet she persisted. I can't think of anything to say," he whispered, his eyes swollen and cheeks stained with tears. "I did everything wrong. I know that. Don't abandon me, John. I I can't endure this separation, not like this." She desperately sought a response from him, something to provide a sliver of hope. But John stood motionless, his hands folded in front of him, completely silent. The sound of her sobbing made the air feel thick with the pain that had grown between them. As he watched her, a part of John pondered when exactly everything irrevocably shattered. Not when he uncovered the betrayal, not when he engaged the detective. Perhaps, much earlier, when he was still attempting to find solutions, but Melissa had already resigned, silently, without his knowledge. This question now echoed in his mind, yet the solution seemed elusive. "What do you want me to do, Melissa?" He eventually spoke, his voice worn, devoid of the previous anger's weight. "There is no going back." Melissa implored with teary eyes, "There must be something more you can do for us." John shook his head regretfully. "I'm afraid there isn't." Echoing their past promises, she urged, "You said you loved me, that we could overcome anything. Remember?" Her voice wavered with desperation. "Let's try again. I know I made mistakes, but let's start anew. Give us a chance." John gazed at her, searching for remnants of their past selves, but the woman before him, broken and pleading for something unattainable, was a stranger to him now. He had lost who Melissa once was. "I did love you," he admitted sadly, feeling the burden of those words. "But love alone cannot mend what's broken. Not anymore." Unable to accept reality, Melissa quivered with fear at the prospect of losing everything. She stumbled up from the ground and moved towards him, hoping that bridging the gap could undo the damage. "John, don't abandon me like this," she pleaded, attempting to grasp his hand, but he retreated a step, evading touch. "I can't carry on without you, not in this way." He observed her wordlessly, recognizing the despair in her gaze. John wished to find words that could still the tempest, but none came. He had spent so long in silence, striving for strength, seeking ways to salvage the marriage. Yet at that moment, he understood there was no more to rescue. "I'm adrift too, Melissa," John confessed, his voice weary. "I thought if I took charge, if I faced you, it would offer me solace. However, the reality is I don't know what steps to take next. What remains isn't sufficient for both of us." The room fell silent once more as Melissa, still breathless, gazed at John. It seemed the truth was finally sinking in. There was no going back from the past. Remnants of promises and plans, their shared endeavors over time, were now just debris. She sensed the ground giving way under her, plunging into an abyss she couldn't escape. "What next?" she asked softly. "What happens now?" John looked at her with a blend of sorrow and acceptance, unable to provide all the answers. Yet he knew for him there was no going back. All that remained was to continue on as best they could. Now we each must go our separate ways, he stated resolutely. There is no other course. Melissa shut her eyes, tears flowing once more, but this time in silence. Only the weight of their breaths and the emptiness encompassing them remained. They had reached an irrevocable point, and though it pained them, they both understood that was the only feasible resolution. For a brief moment, the room was still. Only the sounds of Melissa's labored breaths, John's unease, and the wind outside filled the room. The world seemed suspended in time. John stared at the table, at the papers he had shown her proof of treason. Proof essential for him to finally comprehend the truth. Yet, these documents now carried a different burden. They not only exposed betrayal, but also signified the demise of something far greater. Simultaneously, they denoted an end that was smaller. The betrayal, despite its immense impact, was not the sole reason for the parting. It was merely the final drop spilled in a vessel that had been brimming for quite some time. I didn't wish for it to be like this, Melissa sighed, gazing at the floor. I never wanted it to end this way. John observed her. He trusted her sincerity. There was no denying that on some level she did not desire things to conclude under these circumstances. But the truth was that the decisions they had made over time, the errors, the omissions, the daily petty betrayals, all of it led to that juncture. Regrettably, they both yearned for return, yet no path remained. At last, he inhaled deeply and, with barely perceptible acknowledgement, faced the opposite direction, striding towards the entrance. He realized that if he lingered, the lure to mend what was beyond repair could prove too potent. He could no longer endure a pattern that devastated him. Gripping the doorknob, he cast one final look at Melissa. She remained motionless, tears silently streaming down her face. There were no more words to exchange. John's authority was gone. Thus he departed. The chilling night breeze encompassed him as he exited the dwelling, but unlike prior instances, he did not succumb to its oppression. It felt as though, for the first time in a long while, he could fully exhale. Night had entirely descended when John abandoned the house, leaving Melissa behind amid her own misery. The cold breeze that pierced him seemed to gradually ease the burden he bore within his chest. This marked the conclusion of an arduous voyage. John navigated the city aimlessly, lost in thought, as he recognized the turmoil had subsided, but healing still lay distant. Melissa's betrayal left an indelible mark within him, one that would not mend easily. Yet, there was a newfound sense of liberation, a feeling absent for prolonged periods. For the first time in months, perhaps years, he was free from the torment of salvaging a marriage beyond repair. He abandoned his car in a random spot, gazing into the vacant expanse ahead. The future remained uncertain, yet he knew this would be a self-crafted journey, devoid of doubt and mistrust. All that remained was to progress, even if it meant traversing a solitary path for a while. Meanwhile, Melissa lingered alone in their house. The stillness, initially perceived as an unseen chasm separating them, escalated into a dominating force. Tears persisted, but with each passing moment, their vigor diminished. Despair dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of vacancy. She acknowledged John wouldn't return. She knew he wouldn't pardon her, and the past would never resurrect its former self. And inwardly, Melissa could not fault him. Gradually rising from the floor, she experienced the burden of decisions she had made. The vows he breached, the falsehoods he uttered, and the indelible destruction they inflicted. It struck her with a power she hadn't foreseen. For the first time, maybe, she truly comprehended the consequences of her actions. And in that comprehension, there was a pain she knew would remain etched in her existence for eternity. As Melissa gazed upon the papers John left on the table, she vividly foresaw what awaited: divorce, the conclusion of their tale. Most terrifying for her was the prospect of starting anew, solitary, without John's long-standing stability. Everything she had known crumbled around her, and the harsh truth of losing not just a husband, but also his security pushed her to the brink of fear. With trembling hands, she struggled to sort through her thoughts, but nothing felt coherent. The deception that initially seemed like an escape from his discontent was now clear as the start of their downfall. With John taking everything, legally there was no fight to be had. The idea of confronting the world without funds, devoid of the comfort her marriage once provided, was unbearable to accept. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, John stepped in front of a small, inconspicuous bar, a place where he could vanish for a while. He entered, ordered a drink, and found solace in the dim corner, hidden from the curious gaze. Holding the glass, he pondered over all that transpired, aware that despite the relief, the future would present new trials. Life reconstruction without Melissa, confronting solitude, learning to trust again. Yet, in that instant, he found tranquility with his choice. Her deception had not only ruined their marriage, but also reshaped him while with her. Now he had an opportunity to rediscover himself. Back home, Melissa made what seemed logical. She dialed the phone to reach her lover. Perhaps, somehow, he could be your anchor, your sanctuary. Yet, unexpectedly, it went straight to voicemail. Again, she tried, but his response remained the same. It was as if the ground beneath him was splitting once more. Her lover, the one she gambled everything for, was absent when she required him most. Time trickled by, and Melissa acknowledged with heart-wrenching lucidity that she was genuinely solitary. The man she'd been unfaithful to John with wasn't a remedy, merely a deception. Now, with her husband absent from her life and her lover gone, she confronted vacancy. The burden of her actions felt heavier than anything she could bear solo. That same evening, John concluded his drink and departed the bar. He knew the path ahead would be lengthy, but for the first time in a while, he sensed he had command over his own life. He held the authority to dictate what transpired next, and that, in itself, was a significant stride. Meanwhile, Melissa remained in the house, secluded on the couch, gazing into nothingness. The future she had envisioned disintegrated before her eyes. Without John, without her lover, and devoid of past comforts, all that remained was remorse. A remorse she understood would haunt her forever. The end arrived quietly yet devastatingly. John departed, liberated to reshape his existence, whereas Melissa remained entangled with the ramifications of her decisions. Her possessions vanished, and now she must confront her deepest dread, the understanding that at times, the cost of deceit surpasses what any person can afford. What's your take on this tale? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories with a profound impact. On our channel, we don't condone dishonesty in any form, regarding it as crucial for honesty and loyalty in all relationships.